A country devastated by war, torn apart by famine, isolated from the world, where the average citizen earned less than $1 a day. A country so poor, so cut off that much of the world had written it off completely. Now imagine that same country, just 70 years later, boasting the world's largest navy, the world's biggest middle class, the largest number of billionaires, and an economy so powerful that when it sneezes, the entire world catches a cold. This is not just a story of money. This is a story of strategy, sacrifice, suffering, and one of the most spectacular economic transformations in the entire history of human civilization. Welcome, and today we are going deep. To understand how China got to where it is today, we have to go back, way back, to where it all began. For centuries, China was actually one of the wealthiest civilizations on Earth. During the Tang and Song dynasties, roughly 600 to 1200 AD, China accounted for over 25% of global GDP. It was the world's leader in silk, porcelain, paper, and gunpowder. The Silk Road wasn't just a trade route, it was China's financial highway to the world. But then came what the Chinese call the Century of Humiliation, roughly from the 1840s to 1949. During this period, China was battered by the Opium Wars with Britain, invasions and occupations by foreign powers, the brutal Second Sino-Japanese War, and finally, a devastating civil war between Mao Zedong's communists and Chiang Kai-shek's nationalists. By 1949, when Mao Zedong stood at Tiananmen Square and declared the founding of the People's Republic of China, the country was in absolute ruins. Inflation was catastrophic, infrastructure was destroyed, literacy rates were below 20%, life expectancy was just 36 years. The world's once great civilization had been reduced to one of the poorest nations on the planet. And yet, from these ashes, a phoenix was about to rise. Under Mao Zedong's leadership from 1949 to 1976, China took its first steps, but many of them were in the wrong direction. Mao was a revolutionary genius, but an economic disaster. His first major initiative, the Great Leap Forward, 1958 to 1962, was supposed to rapidly industrialize China. Farmers were forced to abandon their fields and smelt steel in backyard furnaces. Agricultural production collapsed. The result? One of the deadliest famines in human history. Entire villages were wiped out, yet the government continued to export grain even as its own people starved, to maintain the image of a successful socialist state. Then came the Cultural Revolution, 1966 to 1976, Mao's attempt to purge capitalist and traditionalist elements from Chinese society. Universities were shut down, intellectuals were sent to labor camps, entrepreneurs were publicly shamed and jailed. Essentially, anyone with knowledge or skills that could have built an economy was persecuted. By the time Mao died in 1976, China's economy was still largely agrarian, its people were desperately poor, and it was almost entirely closed off to the global economy. But something was about to change, something big. Enter Deng Xiaoping, quite possibly the most consequential economic reformer of the 20th century, a man who stood just 5 feet tall but cast a shadow over the entire world. Deng had been persecuted twice during the Cultural Revolution, sent to work in a tractor factory. But after Mao's death, he clawed his way back to power, and by 1978, he was ready to change everything. Deng's philosophy was brilliantly simple and radically different from Mao's. It doesn't matter whether a cat is black or white. If it catches mice, it's a good cat. In other words, forget ideology. Focus on what works. In December 1978, Deng launched the Reform and Opening Up policy, one of the most important economic decisions in modern history. Here's what he did. Step 1, agricultural reform. He broke up the collective farming system and gave individual families the right to sell surplus crops for profit. Farm output skyrocketed almost overnight. Hundreds of millions of rural Chinese suddenly had more food and more money. Step 2. Special economic zones. Deng created 4 special economic zones, Shenzhen, Zhuhai, Shantou, and Xiamen, where foreign companies could invest, build factories, and operate with far fewer restrictions than anywhere else in China. Shenzhen is perhaps the greatest economic miracle in history. In 1979, it was a fishing village of 30,000 people. By 2020, it was a tech megacity of 13 million people, home to companies like Huawei, Tencent, DJI, and an economy larger than many entire countries. Step 3. Inviting foreign investment. Deng essentially said to the world, come do business in China, use our cheap labor, build your factories here, and the world came in droves. Step 4. Education and meritocracy. Deng reopened universities and restored college entrance exams. He sent thousands of Chinese students abroad to study science, engineering, and economics. These students would later come back and build the new China. The results were staggering. Between 1978 and 2000, China's economy grew at an average of nearly 10% per year, a rate never sustained for so long by any large economy in history. Through the 1990s, China became something the world had never quite seen before, the factory of the entire planet. Western companies, especially American ones, realized they could slash costs by manufacturing in China. Labor was cheap, the workforce was massive and disciplined, infrastructure was rapidly improving, and the Chinese government made it very easy to set up shop. Every major brand, Nike, Apple, Ford, Boeing, Walmart, had Chinese manufacturing at the heart of their supply chains. And with every pair of shoes, every iPhone, every toy, wealth was flowing into China. Then came the moment that supercharged everything. 2001, China joins the World Trade Organization. This was the floodgate opening. China now had preferential access to markets across the globe. Exports exploded, foreign investment poured in, and the Chinese economy went into overdrive. That's a 25-fold increase in just 20 years. No country in history had done anything remotely like it. Here's something most people don't appreciate about China's rise. It wasn't just about cheap labor. It was about an absolutely insane investment in infrastructure. Between 2011 and 2013 alone, China used more cement than the United States used in the entire 20th century. Let that sink in. China built over 40,000 kilometers of high-speed rail, more than the rest of the world combined. Over 160 airports between 2000 and 2020, the Three Gorges Dam, the world's largest power station, hundreds of entirely new cities from scratch. While other countries debated and delayed, China built. And this infrastructure didn't just look impressive, it was the economic engine that connected factories to ports, workers to cities, and goods to global markets faster and cheaper than anywhere else in the world. By the 2010s, something remarkable was happening. China was no longer just the world's factory, it was becoming the world's tech powerhouse. A new generation of Chinese entrepreneurs was building companies that rivaled, in some cases surpassed, Silicon Valley's finest. Alibaba, Jack Ma's e-commerce empire, bigger than Amazon in many metrics. Tencent, the company behind WeChat, the super app used by over 1.3 billion people. Baidu, China's Google, pioneering artificial intelligence. Huawei, building the world's 5G infrastructure. ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok, which conquered global social media. BYD, now the world's largest electric vehicle company, surpassing Tesla in sales. China had done what many thought impossible. It had moved up the value chain, from cheap toys to cutting-edge AI, from knockoff electronics to original innovations, from following the West's technology to leading it in many areas. But China's ambitions didn't stop at its own borders. In 2013, President Xi Jinping announced the Belt and Road Initiative, the most ambitious infrastructure project in human history. The plan spent over $1 trillion building roads, railways, ports, and pipelines connecting China to Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia, essentially recreating and vastly expanding the ancient Silk Road. Through the BRI, China has built ports in Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Kenya, and Greece, funded railways in Ethiopia, Laos, and Indonesia, financed power plants across Africa and Asia. Critics call it debt trap diplomacy, claiming China deliberately loans money to poor countries, then seizes strategic assets when they can't repay. China calls it win-win cooperation. The reality is probably somewhere in between, but one thing is certain. Through the BRI, China has extended its financial and political influence into every corner of the globe in ways that no other country has managed in modern history. Let's talk numbers, because the numbers are truly mind-bending. GDP, nominal, approximately $18.5 trillion, second only to the USA. GDP, China is arguably already number one in the world. Manufacturing, China produces 28% of all global manufactured goods. Trade, China is the world's largest trading nation with over $6 trillion in annual trade. Foreign exchange reserves, approximately $3.2 trillion, the world's largest. Billionaires, over 800 billionaires, more than any other country. Middle class, over 400 million people, larger than the entire U.S. population. Poverty reduction, China lifted 800 million people out of extreme poverty, the greatest poverty reduction in history. The World Bank calls China's poverty reduction achievement the most impressive in history. In 1981, 88% of China's population lived in extreme poverty. By 2021, that number was virtually zero. Now, before you think this is just a straight-line success story, let's be real. China faces enormous challenges that could shape or shake its financial future. Challenge 1. The demographic crisis. China's one-child policy, in place from 1980 to 2015, has created a ticking bomb. The population is aging rapidly. By 2050, China will have more people over 60 than under 30. A shrinking workforce means slower growth. Challenge 2. The property crisis. The collapse of Evergrande, once China's largest property developer, in 2021 exposed deep cracks in China's financial system. Real estate accounts for roughly 30% of China's GDP. A prolonged housing crisis could have severe consequences. Challenge 3. U.S.-China tensions. The trade war ignited under Trump and continued under Biden has seen both countries impose tariffs, restrict technology transfers, and increasingly decouple their economies. The battle over semiconductors, the oil of the 21st century, is particularly intense. Challenge 4. Youth unemployment. In 2023, youth unemployment in China hit record highs, over 21%, raising questions about whether the economy is creating enough opportunities for the next generation. Challenge 5. Innovation versus control. China's authoritarian government has proven brilliant at directed, state-driven growth, but true innovation often requires freedom to fail, to challenge, to disrupt. The crackdown on tech giants like Alibaba and Didi raised questions about whether China can sustain its tech edge. The road ahead for China is not guaranteed. The country faces real, serious headwinds. Whether it can navigate them will be one of the defining questions of the 21st century. Whatever your politics, whatever you think of China's government or system, the economic lessons of China's rise are undeniable and profound. Lesson 1. Long-term thinking wins. China's leaders plan in decades. The Belt and Road is a 30-year project. Their semiconductor strategy is a 20-year plan. In a world obsessed with quarterly earnings, China plays a different game entirely. Lesson 2. Infrastructure is everything. You cannot build a modern economy on bad roads, slow internet, and unreliable power. China invested ferociously in its foundations, and it paid off enormously. Lesson 3. Education is an economic weapon. China produces 8 million STEM graduates per year, more than any other country on Earth. Human capital is the ultimate competitive advantage. Lesson 4. Trade is transformative.
Engaging with the global economy, even imperfectly, can lift hundreds of millions out of poverty faster than any aid program ever could. Lesson 5. Reform requires courage. Deng Xiaoping didn't tinker around the edges. He fundamentally reimagined what China could be and had the courage to face enormous opposition to make it happen. From a war-ravaged, famine-struck, isolated nation to the world's second-largest economy, the world's largest trading nation, and arguably the defining geopolitical force of the 21st century, China's rise is not a miracle. It's the result of strategy, sacrifice, extraordinary leadership, and the hard work of over 1 billion people over multiple generations. It is a story still being written. The next chapters, involving AI, green energy, Taiwan, and the battle for technological supremacy, may be the most consequential yet. That is a question the whole world is watching. If you found this video valuable, please like, share, and subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel grow and bring you more deep dive content like this. Drop a comment below. Do you think China will surpass the US economy within your lifetime? I'd love to know what you think. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed. See you in the next one.